Hello and welcome to the second edition of Priority Message, the brand new podcast from the FRSA. And today we are recording a special pod to mark International Women's Day. So my revolutionary idea for this was to have more women than men just talking about fire service issues. Not necessarily talking about being women, which we are, but just talking about some really important fire service issues. So I'm delighted to welcome to Priority Message today, Dawn Whittaker, who is the Chief Fire Officer and Chief Exec for East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service. Dawn, thank you so much for giving up your time to come and speak to us today.
Yeah, I'm most welcome.
Also, Tristan Ashby is with us. He's, of course, our own Chief Exec, and I'm Beccy Barr. I'm a whole-time firefighter for Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service. So, Dawn, let's get straight into it. You have had a really interesting and quite unusual career path to get to the high rank where you are now. Just tell us a little bit about your background. Your background isn't actually, your original background isn't actually in the fire service, is it?
No. So I have worked in all three sectors, private, public and the voluntary sector. And after leaving uni, my career started with John Lewis's Partnerships. I went in as a graduate on their graduate training scheme, worked with them for about 14 years, did various stores around the UK, and ended up as a department head for them. And managing a collection of different projects as well. And from there, I had a bit of personal information, but I had my son very late in life and wanted a little bit of work-life balance. This sounds bizarre now when I say it, but at the time I was working every Saturday and one Sunday in three because it's retail. And I thought, now I could do with a bit more family time. Went to work for a local authority, went to work for Northamptonshire County Council, and I went into their planning and performance sort of area and put together their programme management office, which I headed up after a while. Then I was asked to go on to secondment into the fire service to help Northants Fire with the adoption of CPA, which was a corporate performance assessment, the Audit Commission one, before the one we've got now. And so I happily went over, absolutely loved it. It was sort of far more dynamic than working for the county council, and thought, oh, this is just great. I'd like to stay. But after a little wee while, it was obvious that, you know, if you're going to work in fire, you need to have the full sort of skill set. So the chief fire officer at the time, a chap called David Archer, said, well, you know, if you're going to stay, you're going to have to think about working those grumpy hours again. And I can't afford, you know, professional managers at your level unless you can do the whole job. So after a bit of head scratching, I decided to give it a go. So I started on a direct entry program. And that was an area manager rank. I came in at area manager, and I'd been managing sort of the performance management for fire, trading standards, community safety, the coroner, believe it or not, and a few other areas. And so I went back to basics. I went on with a retained on-call crew, actually, did my initial training. And just
you went to do your firefighter training.
Yes, so it was an assessment to see if you know, it was going to be for me. Obviously, I wasn't going to be a firefighter, but for me, it was quite important to understand the job and understand what people were going through. So, what's all this wearing BA stuff, and you know, rolling up hose and all that sort of stuff. So I got put through. Yeah, I think my own training team took great delight in a bit of boosting around the drill yard, few body rolls under drop garage doors and all sorts.
Yeah, probably not particularly part of the training program, except the Dawn.
No, yeah, actually, I was the last one on the drill ground with any air left in my cylinder, and they kept on going, another circuit, Whittaker, another circuit. I quickly realised everybody else had found out where their quick release demand valve was, But I kept on going until I thought, right, I've had enough now. So Marcus Connolly, who was a station manager, instructor, I got to the final stop point, and I'd been going, I think I'd done 3 circuits more than anybody else.
Yeah,
and I'd still got there. And I looked him square in the eyes and I went, give me your name, rank and serial number. And he went, you can stand down now, Dawn. It was a bit of a joke, but obviously, you know, it gave me an insight. And although I was never going to be a firefighter, I've never been a competent firefighter. I've never ridden on a fire engine. I wanted to really understand and get to grips about what the role was going to be like. Obviously, I had a fair idea because my partner was in the service. Yeah, that's how it all started.
You came around backwards in a way, didn't you?
Exactly.
The other way up, and in the process did a phenomenally good job at rising through the ranks, but a crashingly awful job at achieving those weekends off.
I admit that was a total failure. In fact, as I look back now, and I've remarried and I've acquired a larger family, and one of the regrets I have is how much time I didn't spend with them. But I'd say now, as we do a bit of life reflection, I'm at that stage in my life where I can do this, and they're all grown up. The youngest one's 23, and they've all said that they got their work ethic from us. That commitment to work, that commitment to the community as well. So, and one of them's a paramedic, one's in the military, one's a lawyer. So, do you know what? We didn't do too bad, did we? So,
absolutely.
Even though I did miss out on quite a lot of school plays, but yeah. So my routing was not traditional. You're right.
Not traditional at all. No. And what do you think? Just briefly before we come back to that, what do you think the fire service gave you? What was it about the fire service that really sparked that passion for you that you didn't get from John Lewis?
So there were some similar things actually, in that, you know, there was that sense of pride in helping somebody to get something that they needed. But for me, it was the real community thing. I guess I didn't get that core value ticked with retail, which is why I probably did a lot of voluntary work alongside my job then. We did work with the homeless. I did work with a few charities which you'll know about because they're water-based charities. Royal Life Saving Society I was heavily involved in. I was involved in I chaired some board of trustees for our local NVB, the Voluntary Bureau, did volunteer car schemes and stuff like that. And I think that was the gap in my professional life. So it all sort of keeps saying to come together when I worked in fire, because there was that opportunity to make a difference, that opportunity to help people. And I just loved the can-do attitude, actually, that real desire to make things better. That really fitted for me.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of firefighters, certainly for me and other firefighters that I know well enough to know their motivations, I think that core of public service is common to a lot of firefighters, as it should be, because we are public servants, aren't we? How does your experience then coming into the fire service from that direction influence how you feel about direct entry in general, you know, nationally for fire and rescue services? Because it's a bit of a thorny issue for some people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And look, I guess I get it. But for me, it's not about seeing it as the route. It's about seeing it as a route. I think generally in the sector, we haven't been that great at change, and we haven't necessarily been that great at leadership and development, if I'm honest. So, you know, I sit on the leadership board and FCC, and we're trying to create different pathways and different products to not only sort of make it a bit more rapid for some people that have got real talent that are existing and employed within the sector, but also opening up and broadening the talent pool. Because, you know, I was chatting to somebody on LinkedIn the other day about it, who was probably in the anti-camp, and I kind of tried to use the example, if you get somebody who has been through, I don't know, training in another field, military, retail, whatever else, and they might be reasonably good at some of the leadership and the people management and commercial management and procurement and all that sort of stuff. But they fancy a career change, career pathway. Are they really going to go back if they're on like 35, 40 grand and say, oh, I know what I'll do, I'll go be a firefighter?
Well, they might, because I was 41. I was 41 when I came to the fire service and did a complete career change, and was literally twice as old as the youngest people on my recruits course.
Yeah, but I've seen your triathlon
well,
record, Becky. So, but you know what I would say
it's
is
not straightforward. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's not straightforward. Different pathways will encourage a wider group of people. So I think one of the things we've suffered from is just a bit of funnel syndrome, only having one route. So creation of different pathways opens up some differences of experience, attitude, I guess. And, you know, I know some really great people out there that I've worked with historically, who are professionals in their own field, who wouldn't come back and be a firefighter, but actually they could add value to the sector, even in the operational command role. One of the best incident commanders I think I've worked with in my 19 years this year, 19 years, was a chap called Richard Hewitt. You might remember him, Tristan. He worked at Suffolk. He was the DEP.
Name rings a bell.
Yeah. And Richard was he's ex-military, his background was military. And I think he was major, served in Northern Ireland, all sorts. He was one of the calmest, methodical guys I've ever worked with, and probably one of the best on the incident ground in terms of incident command that I've worked with. So he was a direct entry. Doesn't mean that it's only the route. And we've got some fantastic people in the sector who've come up, you know, through those ranks. But, you know, if you want to broaden your talent pool, if you carry on doing it the way you've always done it, you don't change that. So, and the numbers are going to be small because the vast majority are still going to be internal talent. But we need to improve the opportunity for them as well. You know, if I'm looking at somebody moving up through the ranks, I need them to have commercial savvy, you know, political acuity, financial acumen. We need to give that to our people, because being a good firefighter will not make you a great area manager, because it's that much of the job. You know, the incident command is an element of the job, but not the hugest part of it. So we need to give other people, give people the tools in their toolkit.
Yeah, I think it's also for me, it's, and I do personally support direct entry, even though I've done the whole thing of going, you know, starting again from the beginning. It's another pillar of diversity, isn't it? And true diversity, not just sort of deciding that we need to recruit certain groups, but true sort of diversity of people and skills. And I think that direct entry is one way of doing that. I know this brings us neatly onto professionalism of fire and rescue services, which I know is one of your passions as well. How do you see, as the fire service evolves, how do you see professionalism coming to the fore in the next few years?
So, you know, I've been around long enough to have seen that journey through IPDS, IRS, and all of the things that came into being. For me, you know, understanding that to be professional, you need to keep some of the old stuff. You absolutely do. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you need to be fit for your current challenges. So greater, you know, understanding, greater analytical ability, emotional intelligence is critical. I think, you know, we've faced a lot, haven't we, in the last 4 years? 1 minute it's COVID, and then potential strike action, and, you know, cost of living crisis. Actually being able to be equipped to deal with all of that, and to forge a way through and a direction through that is really important. And our staff deserve that as well. They deserve leaders that can do that stuff and not just, you know, move from crisis to crisis. That's, you know, often I know my own staff will say to me, you know, we need clarity. you know, we need that inspirational piece around the direction and where we're going. And actually, for me, that's not just about the person who's at the helm having that. That's equipping the whole organisation, because if you do that and you've got leaders at every level, you are going to get a better service out of it. And you know, there are things going on at the moment. You'll both be acutely aware of them, whether they're about, you know, what is the standard we should aim for, what's the culture that the sector needs going forward. All of those things rise from, you know, a clarity of professionalism. We are public servants, you know, we're not here, you know, in terms of self-satisfying our own career progression, or you just about being a good employer. It's broader than that for us. We need to actually make sure we're fit for purpose to solve issues that are emerging in the community, climate change, that sort of thing, and equipped and ready for it. So, you know, professionalism for me covers that breadth of being prepared in the truest sense, and not just in the emergency sense.
And how do you, I'm going to come to defer to Tristan on some of this, but if I can just raise this as an issue. You talked there about the clarity of mission and everyone needing to know where we stand and what we do. How far do you think fire services in interaction with central government are going towards being really clear about what the role of fire services and firefighters is? Because the risk is changing, isn't it? Risks in the community are changing, and we need to know where we sit in that.
So I think when you talk, I mean, and I've worked, you know, in central government, so I understand from, if you like, both sides of the fence, as it were, the challenges to meet the political need and also the professional and organisational need. It's really critical that we're able to have people explaining to government, not just government ministers actually, but more actually the civil servants, the things that are critically changing and what's needed to be put in place to shift that. And some of the discussions we've had at NFCC about Fit for the Future, making sure some of those professional things that we've been talking about in the last few minutes are in place. I don't think we've quite landed all of those with central government at the moment. And that's because fire is just that big on their agenda. When you think about what's been happening with immigration, with cost of living, with COVID, of course, health and immigration services and, you know, other issues have been higher up the political agenda. But we need a clarity of voice into, I guess, you know, those departments to be able to say, this is going to be critically important. The thing is that they will have their issues of the moment, and it's been consistent with that need for balanced strategy. So it's not just about response and the correct response post Grenfell Tower, all the, you know, business safety, its elements, what we're doing with prevention as well, and conveying and demonstrating and articulating these issues in a way which are really clear, and not about, you know, browbeating or chest beating. We need more money. We need this. We need that. It's actually about the community needs are this, and this is how we feel, you know, we can contribute to that, or this is our place in delivering that community need, which I think is we're getting better at. But I think it's taken some energy and some time. And of course, the other thing, and let's just be honest about it, you know, the volume of change in the government in this last 2 years has made that incredibly challenging.
That was one of the things that I was going to come in on, because it's extremely frustrating from our point of view, the amount of different ministers that we end up meeting. I probably meet a minister once, maximum of twice before they change. When I regularly meet with the Home Office, it's never with the same civil servants, never. That consistently changes. And I was just making some notes while you were talking there. The one thing that's consistent about the fire service is the inconsistency. things are changing all the time, whether it be from the very top within the government departments, all the way through to station managers. Managers, and I'd like your view on this, normally are probably in that particular post where they're responsible for 3-4 on-call stations, as an example, for about 6 months. It's never enough time for a relationship to build and to be able to implement whatever it is that person believes needs to be implemented. And I think that is a problem all the way from the top, all the way down to the bottom. And if you agree with that, how do we change that?
Okay, so I'm not going to say that I agree or disagree. I'm just going to give you a different lens, okay? Because having worked in the commercial field, public, private and voluntary sector, I would say the only consistent I've seen is change. It changes everywhere. And actually, if you work with volunteers, even faster, because you don't know that the people you've got on a volunteer project today are going to be there tomorrow, let alone in 6 months' time. So being prepared for the dynamics of shift are a really critical piece of managing change. So you cannot forge a relationship with changing government ministers, because they won't be driven by a relationship with us. We're too small as a sector, and also they've got shed loads of other stuff that's bigger and more important. So you have to write down a convincing argument. There has to be a clear rationale for a change program or change strategy, and that needs to be so transparent that it doesn't matter who comes in and who comes out, or which Home Office official you're talking about. They know that is the raison d'etre. Yeah, they know that is the pitch as far as the fire sector is concerned. And actually then the effort that's required to land that, so a document like Fit for the Future, and explaining it and re-explaining it and articulating everything in the terms of it, is absolutely fundamental. And I learned that in my 14 years working in John Lewis. You don't get anything much faster than commercial change. It's seasonal, basically. In terms of managerial churn, look, it is high in operational posts. Personally, I would say in my own brigade, it's not as fast as the churn that you're talking about, but in some services it is. I've got people, watch managers on fire stations that have been there for 10, 15 years. So there's a real longevity. But obviously, if there are young people coming up through, or new managers in development, they get moved around in order to gain, experience of the wider sector. And that's really important. But there always needs to be some other constant alongside it. So whether that's the group manager or the watch manager, there needs to be some form of consistency. Because if you shift and spin all of the plates simultaneously, one of them's going to wobble and fall off. So that's about having a good workforce development plan in place. So if you're shifting around the station managers because you've got, a number on development programs, that's okay. That's probably necessary for their development. But you need to create stability in some other way, either with your watch or your groups. So, what I would say is, thinking about it in those terms, then there'll always be some sort of churn you can't be in control of, because somebody will decide to leave or retire or go off sick because they've injured themselves or got an illness or something else happens in their life. You've got to be able to be ready to deal with that. I would say it's not perfect, but hey, we don't live in utopia.
No, unfortunately.
I was interested and that's a really interesting lens that you sketched out there about how, another way we can think about the fire sector's relationship with government, which is almost don't worry about who's the current minister, just make the mission speak for itself. And I guess that's necessarily the NFCC that has to do that in a really muscular way, isn't it?
So I think it's NFCC, but I think it's broader, because where our dilemma occurs is because there are multiple stakeholder voices in this. So if it's tight, if FRSA, NFCC, are all talking, understanding a subject that matters to them collectively as stakeholders in a similar sort of way, actually the noise, the white noise, isn't as loud, because when you talk to officials and ministers, then they're hearing consistency of message. That for them is convincing. If they hear 42 different voices all drawing on about different stuff, guess what?
Yeah, it's about making it easier, I guess, isn't it, for them to accept it, which is difficult when we've got all of these different fire and rescue services, dozens of fire and rescue services, all with different funding models, management models, BA procedures, tactical ventilation procedures. It makes it difficult, doesn't it, to speak with one voice when so much about each FRS is different.
So this is one of the really interesting dichotomies, because I will argue for difference, difference in people, difference in experience, but I think there's too much inconsistency in standards, and there's too much inconsistency in core. There cannot be 46 ways of doing some fairly basic things. And here's the interesting point, actually, Becky, if I could draw a parallel with John Lewis's department stores for a moment. It's nothing the same, but bear with. When I was heading up a department, my job was to worry about my staff being competent to perform the role well, the stock and the merchandise being when the right stuff when the customer wanted it, and excellent customer service, right? I did not vex about the till system that we were using, or what the fixtures were, what the hangers were that we were going to put them up on, or what the big seasonal promotion. That was all sorted out in a central head office. Okay, so we didn't dilute the really important things, which were around people, customers and staff, with stuff. And there's so much stuff that goes on. I mean, I remember one of the first weeks I was down here in East Sussex, somebody brought a triplicate document, put it on my desk, and asked me to sign off on a pair of fire boots for somebody as the deputy chief. And I went, nah, I'm not doing that. He's their line manager. Get them to do that. Oh, well, they're not authorised to because of the money. And I'm like, but they're a member of staff. They know if they've got, I don't know this person from Adam, frankly.
So you don't know their feet.
I don't know their feet. I don't know what they work like. I don't know what I haven't got privy of their occupational health background or their quality work. Just give it to them to do. Don't darken my desk with this stuff that you are cutting off the legs of the supervisory officers that are competent to do this stuff. So it required a little bit of a shift in thinking. And what was really interesting, when I sat with my managers in East Sussex to start with, and went, I'm going to give you accountability, just understand with it comes responsibility. So, and it'll take you a while to work it out, because I'm not going to lay it out in 42 different policies for you, right? We're just going to have a sensible adult discussion about which things we think are your job to do and which things are definitely not my job to do, because you're more equipped and you're on the shop front and working with these people. And of course, what it boiled down to, if we really hit the nub of the issue, is, did we trust them? Did we trust those people to make that decision and sign off on a pair of 30 quid boots? Why not?
But that comes back to what you were talking earlier about direct entry and the benefits of direct entry, whereas the fire service seems to be constantly doing things because they've always done it that way. And you need a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh attitude, a fresh look coming in to the service to do things differently, to do things better, to do things that are better for individuals, employees, that, as you said, empowers people, make sure that they feel valued, and the whole organisation benefits from that, doesn't it?
So I think it's just a different lens, okay? And I wouldn't want to work in a whole team of direct entrants, because I would lose, the validity of experience.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a blended approach.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess what I would say, and you in talking to my staff, you might find different views, I will encourage people to, what do you think is the best way of handling it? Okay, that isn't because I haven't got the answer, because I could sit, sometimes I'm really tempted to just go, well, we'll do it like this, because I think I know where we need to be. But that doesn't help people think. That doesn't, start to design in decision making at the appropriate level of the organisation. What we need, command and control of the incident ground. We don't need it in the day job. We need managers to be free enough, have space enough to think. And the really interesting thing is that for a while, I think they kind of went, oh, I'm totally confused now. I don't know if I'm allowed to or I'm not allowed to. Well, try it. Where does the allowance? If the chief said to you, give it a go, there are some obvious policy things that you don't want to step beyond, but you use your intelligence a little bit. And if we get it a bit wrong, do you know what? We'll adjust it as we go. And actually, I guess that move away from reliance that everything's got to be done in accordance with a written guidance and policy. Certain things do need guidance and policy, health and safety, the really important stuff, PPE, all that sort of stuff. But actually decisions about, who to move forward, how to progress the organisation, whether we're going to use that model for community safety or that model. There are people with years of experience, and we need to tap into their potential.
I'm interested to hear how some of the things that you've described there are obviously change and have been change for your organisation that you've brought about. How do you manage dissent, I guess? Some of the noise that you sort of referred to, the background noise, if you like, in terms of the government as well, dealing with lots of different opinions. How do you square that when you're making changes in an organisation and it goes against the grain?
So I think for the most part, if you sit down and talk to people and explain the rationale for a decision and have a good conversation and let them see the whole jigsaw puzzle rather than the edge pieces, for the vast majority, they might not agree with it, but they'll get it. They'll go, you'll see them kind of go, right, okay. And they might even say, and this happened to us, trying to sort out the budget and how the heck we're going to pay for pay increases. Oh, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. Those are tough decisions. Yeah, they are, actually. But that's fine. We can mutually acknowledge that those things are tough without sort of going, you've got it wrong, you've got it wrong, you've got it wrong, you've got it wrong. Move away from the blame to the shared understanding thing. You might disagree. And do you know what? Dissent is sometimes helpful and healthy as well. But, I don't believe in this, I'll write the order down and it'll be issued approach to management. Well, it's not leadership, is it? You will not get everybody to agree. There will be dissenters, and there'll be some people that are angry about stuff. When you're changing, we're going through a duty system change now, and some people are genuinely cross about it. They might understand why, and we've got the data. We'll share the data with them, and we'll share the risk profiles with them. But when it affects them personally, you can't not expect them not to have an opinion about it or feel emotional about it. But there's no point in getting narky with people because they've got an opinion about something or they've got an emotion about it. You just talk them through it, explain the rationale, and then you come to a point where they're either gonna go, right, okay, I don't like it, but I understand it, I just need to crack on, or they're going to go, I don't like it, I don't agree with it, and this isn't right for me. And then you kind of have to say, well, let's explore your options then.
Yeah, so it's a lot of communicating, isn't it? Which again is a skill that you might need to bring in via direct entry or helping people to develop those skills during their career, which I guess is back to where, what makes someone good at one job doesn't make them necessarily good at another.
Exactly. I mean, if I'd been brought up or come through, I guess, from the roots, would I have the same range of tools in my toolkit about listening? And I don't know, because I'd have been probably more used to taking and receiving orders. I don't know. But certainly, you know, I'm not from that camp. You know, I know I can't get consensus on anything. And if there's something difficult and we end up with me having to take a decision, I'm not going to shy away from that. But equally, I want to hear people's views. It's like getting onto the cultural issue. There's a plethora of different views about that. And, you know, even talking to other chiefs, some people say, oh, well, there's no issues in my brigade with culture. And I'm thinking, shine a torch into your dark corners, because, you know, when you employ that number of staff, they're a microcosm of humanity. There are going to be apples in the barrel. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And talking about it with my staff, so I just said, well, we'll have a conversation about it. I'll set up a series of listening lunches and we'll just have a virtual session and get people to, I mean, not get personal stuff off their chest about, you know, if they've been treated badly by an individual or whatever else, but what do you think about our policies? How are we dealing with people who need help and support? Are we going the right route there? Are we being tough enough? Do you feel like there are people that are taking the mick in the organisation that you would like to see, you know, those issues addressed a bit more robustly? What do you think about our culture? And what are your views and ideas about how to take it forward? And, you know, they come with some really good stuff.
Yeah,
I think
again, that's when you
encapsulate information like that, and it's really important to, I think sometimes, and whether the HMIC FRS do this or not, I'm not sure, but when you put surveys around, you can misinterpret a question, and therefore the answer that you're given isn't necessarily correct. Whereas if you're physically sitting down and having a proper conversation with somebody, you can get, I know it's very time consuming, but you can get a hell of a lot more out of it.
I'm not a survey fan, Tristan.
No.
I you know, survey somebody if they like, you know, a new yogurt on the market. Yeah. Okay. Survey for facts, but you do not get a depth of understanding on opinion-based issues out of a survey. And in actual fact, you know, it's proven that those people that choose to respond are either have an extreme view at one end or the other of the spectrum. Absolutely. And you don't hear from the silent majority, because they just think, I'm a bit nonplussed about that. Well, they might have a view, but they just don't complete it. And, you know, the validity. So some surveys come back with a 13% response rate of your workforce. Well, if you're going to take that as the only viewpoint, you're snookered. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when I get out and about around stations, and over the Christmas, I was duty officer over Christmas this year, and I did 5 station visits over Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day. Boxes of biscuits always go down well at this time of year, but just, you know, not with a purpose other than to go, how's it going? What does it feel like at the moment? What's the issue of the moment? You know, what's the change going on this station, in this watch? And you gain valuable insight from listening to that. And, you know, some really experienced watch managers who, when they say, now I like the way we're going with this, Dawn, but I think we need to do a bit more of that now. Okay.
Our station manager turned up on Christmas Day and we were having an extremely boisterous game of Monopoly. So I'm sure you saw some of that over Christmas as well. I wanted to just bring you back to a tweet that you just put out the other day, which I was interested in. You said, I'm inspired by people who see things differently from the crowd and find ways to communicate this effectively without people thinking they're mad. Where did that come from? How do you see that playing out in our organisations?
So just before you answer that, Dawn, me and Beccy haven't had this conversation, but I picked up on that tweet as well, which I thought was really interesting, specifically some of the responses.
Yes.
So yeah, that we hadn't planned that, but I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
So there are a couple of things, I guess, that have prompted that. One is about stasis. This whole issue of if you're in an echo chamber and you're only listening to the views, within your sector and you're not opening more broadly than that, then you are going to limit your opportunities for positive change. Okay, so if you don't look out beyond far, or if this presumption almost that we've got it right, the day you think that, you are missing the plot. Okay, because there are some great things going on out there in other organizations, and sometimes I think we do get a bit into groupthink. And when I hear issues around how are we going to achieve efficiencies and discussions, the next survey that's coming out from the Home Office is on productivity. Okay, we've all got to complete a productivity spreadsheet. And you look at the questions and you think, goodness me, if I went back 20 years, we were our thinking in the commercial sector was further ahead about productivity than this survey 20 years later in the public sector, because this is talking about time and motion sort of stuff. I mean, please log what how many hours a firefighter spends on each activity during the day. My hand went to my head, and I had to massage my own temples, because actually, Kaizen and Lean are far more about, are you growing your outcomes, rather than the minuscule measurement of, how much weight of grams of barley are you putting into a pig, frankly. So you do need measurement, you do need performance measurement, but actually in terms of productivity, if you can't analyze that in an economic value chain, as opposed to, that minuscule management of moment, then I think you've missed the plot. So that was one thing that motivated it, because that irritates me beyond when you start getting to small mind thinking. The other thing is, there are some people that are really trying to do things a bit different in our sector now, and the backlash on some of it is phenomenal. And some of that is about fear of change. Some of it is perhaps because we haven't got the rationale and the explanation out clearly enough. Some of it is about, wanting to maintain status quo, because status quo is safe, hey? Nobody really likes change that's going to impact on them, even if it's better for the sector. So you've got multiple dimensions at play there. And, it's interesting that there are quite a lot of retired voices coming out of the woodwork and commentating on, whether the culture or the economy or whatever else so far is right. And it's interesting because I'm thinking to myself, and what did you do while you were in office? And actually, we do need to encourage this difference of thought. So I wanted to just put it out there as a thought and see what the reaction was. And as you quite rightly say, there's been a variety of reaction. Actually, sometimes the responses you get tell you a lot about the person that's saying it, don't they?
Yes.
But I'm not being judgmental. I'm just thinking, who are the people who want to be part of, our future and broadening our horizons on our sector, and who aren't, blocked by groupthink or stasis, and who think that there are things that can be done differently. That's not throwing all the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not forget it. This is about, what are the options for, our sector going forward that actually solidify what we do in the community. And there are some really powerful ones. I truly believe, having seen some of the excellent work around the UK with cadets and young people, and the outcome from that, young people who might have had, they might be neurodiverse, or they might not be as academic as somebody else, or they might have fallen into a crowd, actually coming out of those cadet programs with a sense of purpose, direction, understanding teamwork, and they might not go into fire, they may, but they might choose a better pathway than if they hadn't experienced, that cadet program. Measuring the productivity of cadet programs will be interesting, of course, because they are about a broader spectrum of increasing education for young people and creating opportunity, not necessarily just about the fire sector.
It's such a delicate balance, isn't it? And there's so much nuance involved in balancing out being an agent of change in a positive way and maintaining tradition where it's appropriate. And I think it must be a very difficult balance, particularly for people in senior roles like you, because it's even a delicate balance for frontline firefighters like me, because people have very different attitudes to that on any given watch, on any given station. And I think probably the only way to deal with that is for people who are positive agents of change to be absolutely confident that they have thought about all these options and got it right and do it anyway.
Yeah, albeit that I think if you think you've got it right and you do it anyway, you kind of missed a bit of a trick in having a conversation and really unpicking why some of those traditions are really important to people. Because sometimes, this badge, this insignia that we've all got on our uniforms, you know the history of that, don't you?
I'm not sure I do. Right,
the 8-pointed star, okay, which is the background insignia to all of our badges. So that comes from the Knights of Templar, the Cross of St. John, and each of those points has a tenet, has a fundamental meaning and principle: humility, service, integrity. That's a really important tradition. And actually, when we're talking about modern day culture in our service, I've gone right back to the insignia and gone, what was that all about? Why do we feel pride in that badge? Is it because it's pretty on our uniforms, or is there a deep connection to it, a deep meaning behind it? And so you start to have those conversations and people go, oh yeah, right, okay. And how long has that been around? And it's in every fire and rescue service. So actually drawing out some of those issues about why those things are really important, I think helps to work out which of the things you're going to leave behind, which things you can change. It cost me a fortune to get this as an additional embroidered emblem onto our standard wicking t-shirts, but it was important to my staff. And I said, why? Why is that important to you? That sense of belonging, the history behind it, the sense of service. Okay, in which case I'll pay £8 extra a t-shirt and you can wear it. If it's the meaning, if that's the meaning that's important to you, because as long as it's not, oh, I want to look good, out and about, because that's not going to carry any favour with me, really. But if it's the true meaning of public service and what sits behind, that emblem of the Knights of Templar and the Cross of St. John, fair enough.
You've reminded me that when I joined, which is like 21 years ago now, we had that in our induction pack. And I wonder how many services still do that, because it's a fantastic point that do people who wear that badge know the reason why they're wearing it and what the meaning of it is? Because
I tell
if it's not
every new person that comes into my service,
brilliant,
we've got it on our website, because that is a tradition with meaning, with value.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be spreading that word now from this day forth. That's my mission.
Just Google it. Google the Knights of Templar.
I'm going to be Googling it.
Yeah, and they'll tell you the history of it and what each of the 8 points means. And I think they're still, the words are a bit old-fashioned, but the principle and meaning is still true today.
Yeah. I think we've been talking for quite some time, Dawn. We've taken up heaps of your time. So I think we should probably wrap it up, unless you've got any further questions, Tristan.
I've just got one.
Go on.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the bearing in mind this is International Women's Day conversation on the reasons for it. There's about 8% of fire service staff are females. If you could do one thing to help improve that statistic, what would it be?
One thing. Okay. It would be to bust some myths. There are lots of sub things underneath that one thing, which I won't expand on too much, but I think you'll get the gist of what I'm saying. There are so many myths out there about our job, who can and who can't do it, what it involves, what the day in the life of is. I genuinely think sometimes we've been hoisted by our own petard. You know, if all we do is talk about, you know, squirting the blue stuff on the wet stuff on the red stuff, actually that's a part of what we do. The biggest part of our job, and actually in a sense the most valuable to the community, is the downstream stuff, you know, stopping those emergencies happening in the first place, because then that family haven't got to go through that grief of being in a situation or a scenario which either affects them or their loved ones or their property or their vehicle or whatever else. Then yeah, that's really important. So bust some myths, show people what the job is really about. I am blessed, if I'm honest, Tristan, you know, down here in East Sussex, my senior leadership team of 8, we're 50-50, 4 women, 4 men. And I think that does bring a different dimension to the service. And actually, you know, I've had a lot of applications for transfer requests from women to come and work in East Sussex. And there's that whole, you know, you've got to see it to be it thing. So yeah, bust the myths, drop the ladder, you know, help and support women, and actually celebrate everybody in the service that's professional. Because if we do that, it only takes a few good men as well to make sure that we are attracting the widest workforce that we can possibly get hold of.
Yeah, I would certainly second that. Men can be allies pretty easily to us, as Tristan is being today, as the man joining in on this conversation. And women can be allies to men for the issues that affect men too. I mean, it's a two-way street, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Dawn, thank you so much for being so generous with your time with us today. I know you're a very busy person, so thank you very much for that from both of us, I'm sure. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you very much. And to you, Beccy, and to our colleague and ally, Tristan. Have a good week. I'm sure there's lots of opportunities out there. We're doing a Bust the Myths workshop. We're doing a zero tolerance workshop. I'm also doing on Tuesday a workshop with women who are open water swimmers, tackling water safety. So lots going on. Choose your subject, get involved, do something for International Women's Day, even if it's just join a webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you.